Rome fell, or so we were told. In 476 AD, when the last Western emperor was deposed, the world believed it had witnessed the end of the greatest civilization ever built. But what if I told you that Rome never truly died? That for another 1,000 years, its power, glory, and greatness continued to shine in the East? Today, I'm going to reveal the most fascinating story your teachers never told you. How a single city managed to preserve the Roman legacy for longer than Rome itself ever existed. And I'm not talking about a mere imitation. I'm talking about an empire that not only kept Roman traditions alive, but transformed them into something even more extraordinary. Welcome to Constantinople, the city of 1,000 wonders, where emperors ruled with the same authority as the Caesars, where Roman law was codified into legal systems that still influence us today, and where engineers developed weapons so advanced they seemed like magic to their enemies. In this video, you'll discover how an empire, later called Byzantine by historians, not only survived countless invasions, but also developed one of the most sophisticated civilizations in history. And I'll prove to you why. By the time you finish watching, you'll never doubt that this was the true heir of Rome. Get ready for a journey through palace intrigues, epic battles, and revolutionary innovations that shaped the world as we know it. And stay tuned. At the end, I'll reveal a surprising fact about how this millennial empire still influences our lives today. Are you ready to uncover the true story of the empire that refused to die? In the year 324, Constantine stood before the ancient Greek city of Byzantium, contemplating what no one else could see. Where merchants and fishermen saw only a modest port city, he envisioned the future of the empire. The location was perfect, a strategic promontory between two seas, defended by deep waters on three sides and protected by natural walls. But Constantine's vision went far beyond geography. Traditional Rome was becoming a burden, distant from the most threatened borders, vulnerable to invasions, and bound by traditions that hindered necessary change. The empire needed a fresh start, and Constantine knew it. But relocating an empire's capital wasn't like moving houses. It meant reimagining an entire civilization. The construction of Constantinople was an engineering project that defied even Roman imagination. Constantine didn't just expand the city, he recreated it. Architects and craftsmen were brought in from every corner of the empire. The old walls of Byzantium were torn down and replaced with fortifications stretching for miles. The natural harbor of the Golden Horn was expanded to accommodate entire fleets. But the most impressive part was what was being built within the walls. A new circular forum, larger than any ever constructed, was erected, with a porphyry column raising a statue of Constantine himself as Apollo, a deliberate fusion of the old and the new. The hippodrome was expanded to rival Rome's Circus Maximus, capable of hosting 100,000 spectators eager for chariot races and imperial ceremonies. Palaces rose on the hills, offering panoramic views of the Bosphorus. Aqueducts cut through the landscape, bringing fresh water from dozens of miles away. Churches began to dot the city, signaling the new Christian era Constantine had inaugurated. But perhaps the most significant aspect was what he chose not to build. There were no grand, pagan temples. This would be a renewed Rome, freed from the weight of certain traditions. On May 11, 330, Constantine officially dedicated his new capital. The ceremony lasted 40 days, blending traditional Roman rituals with Christian elements. It was a moment that marked not just the founding of a city, but the birth of a new era. Yet not even Constantine could have predicted how his creation would exceed all expectations. In less than a century, Constantinople had become the largest city in Europe, a trade hub where Persian merchants negotiated with Gallic traders, and Chinese silk was exchanged for Baltic amber. What Constantine created was not just a new capital, it was an imperial experiment in reinvention that worked beyond his most ambitious dreams. A city where ancient Roman traditions not only survived, but evolved. And it was precisely this capacity for evolution that would be tested in the decades to come. Because while Constantinople grew in splendor, a silent revolution was taking place. In its courts and offices, a revolution that would forever transform the concept of law and justice, with effects we still feel today in our modern legal codes. But that is another extraordinary story worthy of its own attention. If Constantine laid the physical foundations of the empire, it was under Justinian that its legal and cultural foundations reached their pinnacle. In 528, this ambitious emperor embarked on a project many deemed impossible, consolidating 1,000 years of Roman law into a single coherent code. The result was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a work so monumental that modern jurists continue to study it to this day. Imagine the complexity of this task. Thousands of ancient legal texts, some contradicting each other, others obsolete, many written in such archaic Latin that few could still understand them. Tribonian, the brilliant jurist chosen by Justinian, led a team that worked tirelessly for years, distilling centuries of legal wisdom into a unified system. But the Byzantine genius wasn't limited to preserving the past. They were masters of innovation. Nothing exemplifies this better than their most feared weapon, the legendary Greek fire. Imagine being aboard an enemy ship, surrounded by the seemingly calm waters of the Bosphorus, when suddenly jets of flaming liquid erupt from Byzantine galleys. Panic sets in as you realize that water doesn't extinguish these flames. On the contrary, they seem to burn even more fiercely on the waves. The formula for Greek fire was one of the empire's most closely guarded secrets. Passed down from father to son within a select group of craftsmen, its exact composition died with the empire. But we know it involved a mixture of petroleum, resins, and other ingredients, fired through bronze siphons under high pressure, a technology unmatched for centuries. This duality, the meticulous preservation of ancient knowledge and the creation of groundbreaking innovations, defined Byzantine culture. While scribes carefully copied classical texts in monasteries, engineers developed advanced hydraulic systems to create automatons in imperial gardens, astounding foreign visitors. But this cultural sophistication came at a cost. As Byzantium evolved in an increasingly refined and complex direction, the gap between it and the West grew wider. Tensions mounted, particularly in the religious sphere, where seemingly minor theological differences began creating fractures that would eventually divide the Christian world. On the horizon, clouds of change were gathering. The empire that had ruled through law and innovation was about to face challenges that would test not only its physical defenses, but its very cultural and religious identity. A storm was coming, and not even Greek fire could hold it back forever. The storm gathering on the horizon didn't take long to arrive. While the Byzantines perfected their laws and developed their technologies, a series of invaders knocked at their gates, each one more determined than the last. But it was precisely this constant pressure that forged Byzantium into something extraordinary, an empire that turned every defeat into a lesson and every battle into an opportunity for survival. The Avars were the first to truly test Constantinople's defenses. In 626, they surrounded the city with a devastating force, joining forces with the Persians in a coordinated attack that seemed impossible to repel. But this was when Constantine's planning proved its worth. The theoretically impenetrable walls truly were. Greek fire, which we mentioned earlier, turned the Bosphorus into a graveyard for enemy ships. Yet barely a century had passed when a new challenge emerged: Islam. The Arabs, united under a new faith and dynamic leadership, conquered Byzantine territories at an alarming speed. Syria, Egypt, North Africa, provinces that had been pillars of the empire for centuries, fell one after another. In 674, they too tried to take Constantinople. Once again, the city held its ground. However, every victory came at a cost. The empire contracted, adapted, and transformed. The lost provinces were replaced by a system of themes, military administrative districts that turned Byzantium into an efficient but smaller war machine. The culture evolved too. Latin, already in decline, was definitively replaced by Greek. The following centuries brought new invaders: Bulgars, Rus, Normans. Each of them was dealt with through a combination of military strength, shrewd diplomacy, and, when necessary, strategic bribes. The Byzantines had a saying: "Why risk 20 1,000 lives in battle when a sack of gold can achieve the same result. But it was in the 11th century that the greatest threat began to take shape. The Ottoman Turks, originally hired as mercenaries, started establishing their own power in Asia Minor. Unlike previous invaders, they didn't just want to plunder or conquer, they wanted to replace Byzantium as the imperial power in the region. The final test of resilience came in 1453. The Ottomans, led by the young and ambitious Mehmed II, surrounded Constantinople with a massive army and something no Byzantine wall had ever faced before: cannons, technology versus tradition, innovation versus experience. For 53 days, the city that had resisted 2 millennia of invaders faced its destiny. What happened during those final days would forever change not only the fate of Byzantium, but the shape of Europe and the Middle East. Yet the most fascinating aspect wasn't how the empire fell, but how its influence continued to shape the world long after its end, especially through something its conquerors could never destroy: its faith. When the final prayer echoed through Hagia Sophia on May 29, 1453, it didn't mark the end of Byzantine influence, only its transformation. The empire may have fallen, but its soul, Orthodox Christianity, survived. How? Because long before Constantinople's fall, the Byzantines had created something more enduring than walls, a religious and cultural identity that spread from the Mediterranean to the depths of Russia. This story begins with a rupture. In 1054, a seemingly small event caused the greatest schism in Christian history. Representatives of the Roman Pope and the Patriarch of Constantinople excommunicated each other, a religious divorce that split Christianity into Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. The differences seemed subtle: the use of unleavened bread in communion, clerical celibacy, a single word in the creed, filioque. But these minor disagreements masked a much deeper cultural division. The Byzantine East viewed the West as barbaric and too innovative, while the West saw Byzantium as overly ritualistic and stagnant. While Rome spoke Latin, Constantinople preserved Greek. While Western bishops bowed to the Pope, the Eastern clergy maintained a more collegial structure. This division shaped not only religion, but also the identity of Europe itself. Yet the Byzantine legacy transcended religious boundaries. Look up at St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. Those domes, Byzantine, the golden mosaics that glisten in Italian churches. Byzantine technique, the concept of divine authority adopted by European monarchs, a reinterpretation of Byzantine Caesaropapism. The influence goes beyond the surface. When early Italian humanists rediscovered Plato and Aristotle, they consulted Byzantine manuscripts. When medieval jurists sought legal precedents, they turned to the Corpus Juris Civilis. Even the fork, yes, the dining fork, was introduced to Europe through Byzantium. And perhaps the most surprising legacy: after 1453, Moscow declared itself the Third Rome, the heir to the Byzantine legacy. The Russian Tsars adopted the Byzantine double-headed eagle as their symbol, married Byzantine princesses, and assumed the role of protectors of orthodoxy. The very word Tsar derives from Caesar. Today, when a lawyer cites Roman law, when a religious leader dons ornate vestments, when an architect designs a monumental dome, or when a ruler invokes divine authority, echoes of Byzantium resound. The empire may have fallen more than 500 years ago, but its influence lives on, woven into the very fabric of our civilization. From the fall of Rome to the fall of Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire not only preserved the Roman legacy, it transformed, adapted, and extended it for another 1,000 years. Its laws shaped our modern legal codes, its architecture inspired some of our greatest structures, and its cultural influence still echoes in society today. But perhaps Byzantium's greatest legacy was proving something the Roman Empire itself had taught us: that true power doesn't lie solely in military strength, but in discipline. Speaking of Roman discipline, did you know that it was precisely this element that made the Roman legions virtually unbeatable for centuries? If you're curious about how Rome built the greatest empire of the ancient world through its legendary military discipline, click on the video now appearing on your screen. And while you decide whether to uncover the secrets of the Roman legions, let us know in the comments. Do you consider Byzantium the true heir of Rome or a completely different civilization? The debate is open.